Hello and welcome to today's edition of Your Questions Answered with Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. In this program, we take your questions that you send to us via email, and Father Gruner answers them. We have discussions about them. And please continue to send us these questions at questions@thefatimacenter.com. Here's a question that just came in about All Saints' Day. It says, All Saints' Day in my diocese was designated as not a holy day of obligation this year because it fell on a Saturday. How could the bishop just change the observance of a holy day?
Well, again, if we can get behind or beyond that evil council, the Second Vatican Council, I'm reminded of Pope Gregory the Great. Pope Gregory the Great died in 604 AD. And there was a council preceding him by about 50 years. And it's actually 553, if I recall. It's the Second Council of second in both cases, Second Council of Constantinople, if I got the right city. In any case, there were some bishops who, under Gregory the Great, St. Gregory the Great, had a problem of conscience with this council. And his advice to them was very simple. He said, just pretend that council didn't take place. Act and go on with your life, and you're running your diocese and everything else as if it didn't happen. Just go on from whatever the church was saying before, ignore that, and carry on. Now that advice would be perfect for the Second Vatican Council. I mean, there's lots of things that are said in the Second Vatican Council which are of the faith, which have been taught before, and all the rest of it. But when you take Second Vatican Council as a council... And in its totality, yes. Yeah. So in fact, why do I mention him? Because here we have, before the Second Vatican... So I'm speaking about before the Second Vatican Council, I can tell you what it was. There were 10, it was set by the Vatican, sent by the Pope. There are 10 holy days of obligation for the universal church, for the Catholic Church over the whole globe. And of course, I was born before the Second Vatican Council, and I know in Canada, and I know in the States, there are only 6 days that were practiced as the holy days of obligation. But the bishops of Canada had permission from the Vatican to not use 4 of those 10 universal days. And the bishops of the United States had the permission of the Vatican to not use 4. They weren't the same 4 days. In Canada, Epiphany, one of the 10 holy days of obligation, was kept, whereas the United States kept the Assumption, whereas Canada did not keep the Assumption as the 6th. But those days were then set in stone. Mm-hmm. And in the country of Canada, no matter what year it was, whether it was a Saturday or, if it was a Sunday, you went to Mass anyway, but any other day, it was Saturday or Tuesday, it didn't matter. Those are holy days of obligation. You're bound to go to Mass under pain of mortal sin. And that was set, and everybody knew it. So if you traveled in Canada anywhere, it was the same rule for everybody. I'm talking now with the Latin Rite. It would be the same thing for the Ukrainian Catholics or the Greek Catholics. But the point is that it was universal. And everyone knew in that geographical territory, that was the law. And no bishop had the right or the possibility of changing it. Okay, so now I have not kept up with what has changed with what the bishops have been given powers. I'm told they have these, but I'd like to talk about what St. Thomas says a little bit. St. Thomas has, I read his whole tract on law. It was fascinating, and it wasn't part of my course I had to take, but he's got a very interesting passage on, should someone in authority change the law? Well, he says, it's one thing to have the authority to do it, but not every change in the law is prudent or without sin. I mean, I'm putting without sin. So he points out, I'll give a secular example. It's in the power of the local authorities in each country to change what side of the road they drive on. So in England, they drive on the left-hand side. In North America and most of Europe, generally, they drive on the right-hand side. Now, it's technically speaking within their power to have an act of Parliament tomorrow or an act of Congress and say, from tomorrow onwards or 6 months from now or whatever day they want to say, from now on, everyone's going to drive on the left-hand side instead of the right-hand side. Now, thank God we don't have such fools in Washington or Ottawa to do that much, because obviously there'll be great confusion. Now, they have the authority to do it, but is it in the interest of the common good to do it? Mm-hmm. Now, in itself, driving on the one side of the road or the other, in itself, in essay, is not significant. I mean, it's one or the other. I mean, so when you go to England, you don't say, well, these guys are all fools because they're driving on the left-hand side. Everyone is doing it. But the point St. Thomas points out is that by changing the law for an equally good law, is not enough reason to change the law, because then you have the force of law that the people have by custom and habit that you now lose by changing law arbitrarily for no good.
And cause a lot of confusion.
And cause a lot. So in the same way here, I think this applies. That just changing, I don't know if he's got the authority. I'm sure somebody was going to say, but Father, he does have the authority. In a way, I don't care if he has the authority. If he doesn't have the authority, he should never have done it. If he does have the authority, he shouldn't have done it anyway, because he's causing confusion, to say the very least. And in our secularized society that we have today, why bring one more thing to... The holy days of obligation are something that makes us a little bit more aware of our Catholicity, a little bit more aware of our holiness, that we are called to be holy, that we have obligations to God, and that we give witness to that before our secular neighbors, our Protestant neighbors. We're giving witness to the fact that today we have to go to Mass because A, it's a holy day of obligation, because the Pope said so, because it's an important day, because all the saints, we should celebrate their holiness and where we want to go, and because we want to give witness to the fact that Mass is the most important act of worship, not just for Sundays, but for every day. But if we can't go every day, at least we collectively go on special days, and this is a special day.
Well, also part of the message that it sends is that if you have to choose between a practice of your faith and inconvenience,
Yeah.
or convenience, you choose convenience.
Yeah.
If it's going to be too much of an inconvenience, then the faith can be just put aside. That's the message that's being sent here.
Yeah.
And especially now, it is we should be sending the opposite message, that the faith is worth living for, worth dying for, and going to Mass one extra day for 6 days of a year
well, the other thing
is no great... many of us who go to the Trinity Mass, we drive a half hour to go to Mass, or we go driving out. People are driving an hour. I was talking with somebody who lives in South Dakota. He drives 2 hours each way to go to the Latin Mass because it's the only place he can find. Going to the people who go to their parishes, just going to their parishes on a holy day is no great inconvenience.
No, absolutely not. And I agree that it's sending that message. Whether the bishop intended it or not, that's the message he's sending. And so I don't know if a bishop can change it, but I don't think he has the moral authority to do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether he has the legal authority, I'm not sure. In the past, he didn't. Okay, but I don't keep up with all these changes because after a while they become insignificant, or just become confusing. But in turn, it's a little bit. The second thing, we have our holidays. It's inconvenient for our staff to be on holidays instead of wanting to be with their families. Some days we have the holy days, and so this year they didn't get a holiday because it's on a Saturday. But we still have the obligation to go to Mass on Sunday, on the Holy Saturday, and we had the obligation not to go shopping on that day. And I know some it's an inconvenience for them, so they had to go. Either they had to go the Friday before, or they had to go afterwards, or whatever it is. But a holy day of obligation is meant for God. It's not just the Holy Mass, but it's like a Sunday. We can't be doing unnecessary shopping, and you have to plan around it. So and for that matter, it's also meant for your soul. It's not just the inconvenience of it. You give it to God, and God gives you back. You spend some time saying your prayers. You spend some time in meditation. God talks to you. I mean, you don't hear a voice, but you get a message. Things become clearer for you.
Well, the thing about Sundays and holy days is Mass is supposed to be the absolute minimum.
Yeah.
Any catechism worth its salt will talk about the fact that we should not only go to Mass but also spend some time that day, in extra prayer or catechism study or reading the lives of the saints, or to further sanctify the day.
Sure, and ultimately we have all these influences. I mean, from the time you get up in the morning, and even if you don't turn the radio on yourself, somebody else is going to turn the radio on in your presence. You're going to hear stuff that are either useless or worse than useless, and distract you from. I mean, if you're supposed to pray all the time, it's pretty hard to pray with some of that stuff going on. So here's a time given to God, not for these other things, and you're controlled. Hey, I don't have to listen to that stuff. I'm in my house now. I'm going to church now. I'm going back and we're going to give this day to God in every way we can.
So basically what we're saying here is everything points to even if the bishop, quote unquote, has the authority to do it, which is questionable. It's something that a bishop shouldn't do.
Yes.
Because it denigrates the holy days. It sends the wrong message. And as I said, it says you choose between the faith and convenience. Choose convenience. And
I think the other thing that happens, I don't know if you have any more time to deal with this, but I'm reminded of, in my experience, and I'm sure that the bishops in Canada may or may not like my observation, but the Latin bishops are not as smart, in my view, as the Ukrainian bishops in Canada. I don't think it's because the Ukrainians are smarter, but I think it's because the Ukrainian bishops have insisted on that Friday you must abstain from meat every Friday, unless it's a major feast like Christmas or New Year's or something like that. You have to, and I think that the grace that the Ukrainian bishops are giving their people by giving this witness to the faith as well as to making this act of sacrifice redounds also to the leadership that they're getting from their bishops. And that's why I think they're a lot smarter for the few things, when I haven't done the study recently, but a lot smarter in their governing of their dioceses, because they're getting graces that their Latin counterparts are not getting, because they're not insisting upon this fasting and abstaining on Fridays.
Well, we've done a program before about the abstaining on Fridays, and I think you're right that the more the leadership actually lives and prays the faith, the greater grace they're going to get for guidance, and that's desperately what we need right now. So that's all for now, and we will see you on the next program. Thank you.